So everyone who's joined, we thank you so much. This is the second of the Upcountry Maui Skills Workshops. We do them every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And Lyman, I see he's on. I think he has one of your starters, Carly. So that's good to hear. And what we're doing is actually having presenters to talk about different skills that students, people across the island, people on the mainland are interested in sharing. And what that does is inspires more people to check into Rotary, more people that want to get involved in service work and service projects, and actually help the network from a business to business perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carly.
All right, thank you so much for that intro. So for those of you that don't know, my name is Carly Heims. I was in the Rotary Club of Upcountry Maui for about 5 years. And then about a little less than 2 months ago, we moved back to Portland, Oregon, where our family is, because we have a little baby. It's about 7.5 months old. So she's going to bed now, so we can get into this. I know you're all here to learn about sourdough. So we will get into it. Oops. There we go. Let's start from the beginning. So like Frank mentioned, we're doing these Rotary Skills Workshops 2 times a month. Great way to learn about new things. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about sourdough. So sourdough is not a type of bread, it's a way to make bread. So instead of the baker's yeast that you buy at the store, you use this living creature basically that's flour and water and wild yeast and bacteria that's found in the air and in the flour that grows and bubbles, and you keep it alive either in your fridge or out on the counter. And it's filled with good things. People say it's one of the healthiest breads. It has gluten in it, at least. It contains lactobacillus or lactic acid bacteria, which you find in fermented foods like yogurt and kimchi, all those good things for your belly bacteria. And a lot of people think sourdough is just to make bread, like that beautiful loaf you see right there. But sourdough can be used in pretty much any recipe that flour is found in. You can make a delicious chocolate cake or pancakes or banana bread. Just look up the recipe and you'll find something for sure. So just a little bit about my background, how I got into it. I grew up eating my mom's sourdough pancakes, which were always light and delicious. And she was using my grandmother's starter, which she brought with her on a trip to Maui one time. And I started making it, got into it, and then I stopped for a while. But I had shared the starter with some friends. And a friend had brought me a loaf from that starter when I was pregnant. And man, I started making it all the time. I just wanted to eat it every single day. So I started baking. I post, my loaves to an Instagram page, and then people on Maui started learning about it and ordering loaves. And I was making about 6 to 8 loaves a week in a teeny tiny little oven that barely fit my Dutch oven into it per week when I right before we left. A little bit about the history. So sourdough is the oldest form of leavened bread. They used it in ancient Egypt, and the earliest records about 1500 BC. And pioneers used it, miners used it in the gold rush in California. There was actually a group of them called sourdoughs because they used it so much. And then recently there's been a huge renaissance. With COVID, people are stuck in their houses looking for something to do. Yeast was low at the stores, so people started making sourdough and sharing techniques and starters with each other, and it's just exploded, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. People needed something soothing and delicious to keep them busy. Little bit of the vocabulary as we go into it. So the starter I've been talking about is that mix of the flour and water and the wild yeast and bacteria. It's kind of the texture of, with yogurt. The crumb is the holes, the pattern of holes inside the bread like you see in that upper picture. So a more tight crumb is more dense, and an open crumb is like big holes that your butter. Okay, sorry, somebody's doing feedback. Okay, so the scoring is the cuts that you do on top of the loaf, the design that you'll get once you bake it. The ear, like that lower picture, if you do just a big slash on the side and it expands like that and you get that crust on top, that's the ear. And then oven spring is how much the loaf will lift from dough in the oven, 20 to 30 minutes in the oven, just how much it bounces up, which is going to be the size of your final loaf. A little more about the starter. There's a beautiful active starter right there. You can grow your own. You just mix some flour and water. There's plenty of instructions online and YouTube. You can go find it, you're smart people. So like I said, it's a living creature. You need to feed it once or twice a day if you leave it out on your counter. And if you keep it in your fridge, once a week to once a month is fine. It's super resilient. And what you'll usually see is a separation. You'll see liquid on top and this goo on the bottom. You can just mix that all right in and dump out most of it, and then leave maybe a tablespoon of it. Add a half a cup of flour, half a cup of water, mix it up, and in a few hours, you're gonna see it start bubbling again. You wanna feed it about 8 to 12 hours before you bake. You want it active and bubbly, so think when you're really, really hungry, you wanna eat and then let it settle before you go, but you don't want it to be hungry again when you start baking with it. And then you can do the float test to see if your starter is ready to bake with. You take a scoop of, what you see right there and drop it into a bowl of water. And if it floats, there's enough bubbles in there and you're good to go to make your bread. And like I said, you pour out some of it, put that in a jar and leave it in your fridge, and you can make tons of delicious recipes, including pancakes and that chocolate cake. There's a million. Like I said, I learned a lot on the internet, so just Google it if you want to know more. So I'm going to talk about how I make my loaves. People make loaves all different kinds of ways. So do your research, try some different methods, but this is what I usually do. I make a double batch because it's fun to share, or you can slice and freeze a whole loaf so you don't have to make another loaf the next week. Or in our house, a couple days later. So this is my double batch recipe. There's 7 cups of flour. You can do any mixture of all-purpose, bread flour, wheat flour, or rye. Just keep in mind if you do a lot of wheat or rye, it will be denser. So you usually want to lighten it up with some of the lighter flour. Use 3 cups of warm water, 1 cup of active bubbly starter, like you see in that Tupperware there. And you want to mix that all together first, let it sit for about an hour for the autolyse phase, and then you add the salt in after that. Because salt slows down fermentation. So you want to mix it all together so it has a chance to meld and start fermenting before you add the salt. Are there any questions so far? If there are, feel free to throw something up in the chat. If not, I will keep moving on. Or you can unmute yourself briefly. So the next step is the stretch and fold once all your ingredients are together. You do this about 15 to 30 minutes apart for about 2 hours. And you just take up some of the dough and fold it over the top and rotate it and keep stretching it and folding it over. What that does is it creates a lot of layers, and as that's kind of flattening out, It builds the strength of the gluten, and strong gluten's important because it'll hold all the bubbles. So the stronger your gluten is, the more airy and fluffy and light your bread will be. The next step is the bulk ferment. In a hot climate like Maui and Hawaii, it can be ready to go in a couple hours after your stretch and folds. Somewhere like Oregon, it could probably go about 6 hours. Or if you are on a tight schedule or just want to bake it the next day, you don't have time, you can always put that right in the fridge and leave it there for up to 3 days before getting it ready to bake. So shaping is something that took a lot of practice for me, so please don't get frustrated. You know, you really got to try and try and try again with sourdough. And I still mess up sometimes. I let things overproof and my timing's off, my temperatures are off, but it's usually pretty edible. It may not be pretty, but it'll taste good. So there are a lot of different techniques for shaping. This is taking all that dough that you just saw. I'll usually put it down on a cutting board, split it in half, and then make 2 big loaves. And then after shaping that, so you're getting the surface tension that'll give it that oven spring that we talked about earlier. After shaping, you'll put the loaf upside down into a bowl, a floured bowl or basket, 1 to 2, and then wait 1 to 2 hours before baking. Then when you can preheat the oven about 20 minutes before the end of that time so that it's already preheated when it's ready to cook. And one thing that I learned halfway through my journey is that if you put your Dutch oven or your pan that you're using in the oven as it's preheating, that'll help get more oven spring to put the dough into a hot pan already. Some people use parchment paper on the bottom. Just make sure it's a high temperature one so it doesn't get stuck to the bottom. You can throw a little flour or cornmeal in the bottom of your pan just to keep the dough from sticking to the bottom too. Scoring is my favorite. This is really a beautiful way to express your creativity. And I've always been a pretty creative person and don't have a ton of outlets. So once I started making sourdough, I just kind of went wild. And of course, I'm on Instagram seeing all the beautiful pictures. So I borrow methods and designs, and those are some of my favorites. So scoring is, like we said, the cuts on top of the bread. And so I'm showing you on the left is the scored raw loaf. In the middle is after the oven spring, and to the right at the end is the finished loaf. One cool trick is to use rice flour on the outside because it doesn't burn as easily. You just keep a beautiful, nice contrast there. I use a really, really thin, flat razor blade, and it's, I wish I brought one down, I'm sorry. But you'll see them at the hardware store or online. You can just get some. And you really don't know what you're gonna get. You make certain cuts in certain areas, and depending on how deep you make them or what direction they're going in, you're gonna get very different results. Okay. So the baking part, there's my beautiful blue Dutch oven that my husband got me. So I will have preheated that to 450 degrees. And hold on, something in the chat here, any questions? Not been able to find razor blades. Yes, if I was not prepared. Dan, if you're hearing this, if you can send someone down with some razor blades. My dad's on. But if not, I'll follow up with you guys later. Okay, so, sorry. With the baking, moisture creates a crunchy crust, which is why I use the Dutch oven. And then if you don't have a Dutch oven, You can get moisture in there another way. You can take a spray bottle and just do a few sprays and get it all steamy in there as you're putting the loaf in. Or you can put a oven-safe bowl with some water in there for the first 20 to 30 minutes from baking. And then you'll either remove the moisture or take the lid off of your baking apparatus and cook for another 15 minutes to get a brown crust. So some pro tips before we head out. You can take oh, we got the razor blade delivery. Thank you so much. So this is the tool I use for scoring. I'll show you again when we're off since I'm screen sharing right now. I'll show you at the end. So I made that rotary loaf there for a rotary party we had. One of my proudest loaves. So just wanted to share some tips. The hardest part about sourdough is you're not supposed to cut into it until it's 100% cooled. We all love fresh bread out of the oven, but sourdough is just not good like that. If you cut into it when it's warm or hot, the whole loaf will get all kind of gummy, weird texture. So it's best if you bake it in the morning to eat it at dinner, or if you bake it at night to not cut into it until the morning, as hard as it is. A good way to preserve the maximum freshness of your loaf is to slice it after it's fully cooled and put it in a Ziploc in the freezer. And you take one of those slices out, toast it up, and it'll taste super fresh. Like I said, I always make a double batch. It's so fun to give the loaves away, especially when you get a text 10 minutes later talking about how good it is. It's just a wonderful gift that, you know, you can't buy at the store. Practice, practice, practice. I was not very good in the beginning. I got better. I'm definitely not a professional. I'm still learning all the time. Watch YouTube videos. That's really how I learned how to make bread. I just watched a ton of videos and kept trying and experimenting. So hopefully you can take some of these tips and tricks, ask your friends or family or next door or Facebook for a sourdough starter and see if somebody has some to share with you if you don't have one. I know Lyman and Nicole have some. I know other people on Maui that have some. If you're in Portland, I can hook you up. But a lot of people are willing to share and love to. That is it for now. Are there any questions? You can go ahead and unmute yourself or you can ask in the chat. So Frank is asking the type of adjustments I make for high altitudes and humidity. I'll let you know when I cook there. You really have to just practice with it. My first loaves when I moved to Oregon from Maui weren't great because I wasn't used to the climate, but just try more time, less time, higher temperature, lower temperature, and you just gotta keep trying and figure out what works best for you in your climate. Or research online. Gram versus volume and rye flour with unbleached flour. Different combinations of flour. Yes, I have. I usually do about 4 to 5 cups of all-purpose or bread flour, and then 2 to 3 cups of a wheat or rye. When you use, like I said, when you use too much of those dense flours like rye and wheat, it makes for a dense loaf, and I like them light and fluffy. Lately, I've just been doing all-purpose flour, and they're wonderful. Just experiment, see what you like. And then there's plenty of recipes online that measure in grams. I'm not that fancy. I don't really measure very carefully. They always turn out a little different. Nextdoor community app would be a wonderful place to find a starter. Good point, Zach. From Jill, is this starter, what would be the discard? Yes. So your starter, you keep in, say, a jar. It's about 1 cup volume. And then when you feed it, you dump out most of it, all but about a tablespoon. and then you'll feed that remaining about a half a cup of flour and half a cup of water. What you had just dumped out is considered the discard. So a lot of people keep, a big jar in the fridge that they can dump that into, put in the fridge and reserve for any future recipes. And you can just Google sourdough discard recipes. King Arthur flour has some great ones. I've made scallion pancakes and chocolate cake and so many good things. Okay to bake and not have a scale? Absolutely. You'll get used to the different textures of dough as you're working with it. I've been liking to add a little bit more water lately, personally. Just find the dough a little bit easier to work with, but too much water can make it real hard to work with. So really, it's all just experimenting and playing. Sorry if I'm repetitive with that. How deep do you cut with a razor? Good question. About a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch deep. If you are doing more intricate designs, you want to go a little bit more shallow, about 1/8 of an inch deep. Starter always gets thin, clear liquid layer on top. Yes, you can mix that back in. That's called the hooch. It's actually alcohol that's made from the fermentation. But you can go ahead and mix that liquid layer back in, and then you'll dump, you'll discard, and then feed it again. And hydration, good question, Jill. Hydration is the amount of water in your recipe to flour, or flour to water. So if it's a 70% hydration loaf, you have 70% the amount of flour in water volume. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Those are great questions, everyone. Jill, I'm sorry you haven't been able to find razor blades. I'm going to go off screen sharing to show it so I can show you what I use. If you do Amazon, I'm pretty sure they have some Amazon going on. So can you all see me? If you want to go to speaker view, I'll show up. Or if you can pin my video to make me big, just go to the 3 corners over my face and go to pin video. So these are Vanderhagen, made in Germany, ice tempered stainless steel razor blades. Yes, Frank?
Have you tried the ones where the razor blade is curved? And it
Yeah,
sits in a little...
So the curved razor blades you see are on a tool called a leme. It's L-A-M-E. And it's basically just a stick that will go through and it'll bend, it'll curve it. You can just stick anything that'll fit through that to give it that curve. Yeah. I was using one for a while, but I found that just this in my hand, I could get a lot more accurate. When I used the leme, I just felt like I would drag it a lot. I'm probably using it wrong, but I like the control I get by holding it like this. Yeah, Frank?
I have to step away at 4:30, but I wanted to ask which people have never made sourdough bread on the call?
1, 2.
Okay, there I see 1. Okay, so 2.
Hi, Louise.
4.
3. 4.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot. It's actually a lot of fun, and I wanted to introduce everybody to Doug Busby. He's been on quietly. Doug is a member of the Valparaiso Rotary Club in Indiana, and he and I are pretty good friends.
Awesome. Hi, Doug.
How you doing, Doug?
All right. Does anyone have any further questions about the sourdoughs? You can feel free to unmute yourself or.
I should. I'll say hi to Frank from this great distance, and introduce my wife, Christina. Frank, you remember her?
Frank.
And Christina likes to bake bread.
I do, and I've never done sourdough, so I don't even know how to make a starter. So I have to go one step before your presentation.
Yeah, like we said, to get a starter, if you post something on Facebook and say, do any of my friends have a sourdough starter they're willing to share? Or the Nextdoor app, it's a neighborhood-based app or website. And people love sharing their sourdough starter. They find such joy in making sourdough that they love spreading the joy by sharing that.
Oh, thanks for the advice.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Very good.
Your mom gave me some sourdough starter and I killed it.
That's okay. We've got plenty more, Jill. It's okay. I've killed them before too. That's why I give it away too, because then I can go back to all my friends that kept good care of theirs and take it back. So it's very easy to share. Well, wonderful. Thank you all.
So, Carly,
Yep.
if you kill it, how do you bring it back to life?
So like I said, sourdough is very resilient. It's hard to
Yeah.
actually kill.
But you said it's special, right? It's like something your mother or grandmother made a long time
Yeah,
ago.
my grandmother's starter. I also just read an article that had myths of sourdough, and it said that an older starter is better. They say a 100-year-old starter is probably not way better than a 10-year-old starter. So as cool as it is, you know, a new starter can make just as delicious bread as a 100-year-old one. I probably
Would
didn't.
any yeast work, or to get it going again?
Oh, to get it going again?
Yeah.
You can add a little bit of yeast. My mom has done that before. If you're trying to be a purist like me, I'll just dump out most of it, feed it, and just keep a close eye on it. Probably do it every 12 hours just to get it, you know, it's basically starved when it's at that point. And you just need to feed it, and plump it up with those bubbles.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to figure out how to get some starter and try to make it, or else make my own starter. Thank you.
Let me, I'm just going to put up a YouTube link real quick. I'll put it in the chat so you can just click on it, and then you'll have access to my YouTube channel. I only have like 3 videos on there.
Okay.
But I do have one for sourdough. Oops. I do have one for my
And Carly, are you still selling bread? Can I just do it that way and cheat?
Sure, why not? Or I'll man, I wish I made you one I'll give you one for the baby clothes.
There we go.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop. Leave now. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Well,
welcome back to Portland. Where are you, Jill? Are you in Portland or are you in? I'm in Portland. I'm in Portland. Well, and you don't have any sourdough starter for me? It's in Sisters. Ah, okay. Get some from Lynn. Carly's mom will give us some more, right?
Of course.
Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
So currently in the chat, there's a YouTube video. That's my double batch no knead recipe with more hands-on instructions if you'd like to watch that. There's a couple other videos on there that talk about sourdough. So
you should be on TV.
What's that?
You should be on TV.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
You're lovely.
I feel like I'm on TV now.
Good to see you.
Joining our next skills workshop will be with Nick Winfrey, if you're interested. He is one of our Rotary members. He'll be talking about having a career in nonprofits. And that'll be the same information that you have for this Zoom call. And that will be 2 weeks from today. Right, Lynette?
Actually, it is the 14th of October. They're on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of every month. So that'll make it October 14th.
All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening or afternoon, depending on where you are.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you, Carly.
Today. That was really great, Carly. Thank you so much. And remember the Rotary Club of Upcountry Maui. We would love to have you Zoom in. We Zoom in. We have our Zoom meetings right now, Friday mornings, 8 o'clock. If you're interested, get a hold of anybody and we'll send you the Zoom link. See you Friday. Thanks,
Thank you.
Carly.
Thank
That
you
was
so much from Valparaiso.
Oh, of course.
nice to meet you,
Carly.
Doug and Louise.
Yeah.